Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and today we're going to have a schmooze day where we have a conversation with people about who knows what because we don't plan in advance. Here in Toronto with me is Elizabeth Renzetti, who is a wonderful columnist for the Globe and Mail, and she's just been in Berlin for a while. I don't know how long you were there, but probably wasn't very long, were you, Liz?
We were there for a year, but actually I've been back since August 2020. So we've been back for like a year and a half. Yeah.
No, but weren't you recently over there again?
I canceled my trip because of COVID. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
She tells me that she's got COVID right now.
So I do.
Actually, you're the first live COVID victim patient that I have ever seen online.
I'm patient zero. Yeah.
Yeah, patients. I haven't seen anybody who was actually sick with it before. So now that you're a patient, thank you for being someplace besides here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. And in Montreal, I think you're in Montreal, aren't you, AB?
Yeah, I am now.
Abraham Weisfeld, who normally spends half his year in Nablus, Palestine, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But he can't right now because of COVID. So we're all trapped where we are. Yeah. And here in Toronto with me is Adam Wynn, my right-hand person. He's with me every day and sometimes at like 3 a.m. if I got a problem. And in Kenya, we have Davidson Ahoya. And Davidson, I don't know where you are exactly, but I know you're in Kenya. Say hello, Davidson.
Yeah, hello, Meta and everyone.
Hello.
Yes, I'm in Kenya, in East Africa. I'm not in the city, I'm in the countryside. I'm in the western part of Kenya at the base of Mount Elgon. Mount Elgon is a region that divides Kenya and Uganda. This is a volcanic mountain that lies on the boundary of Kenya and Uganda. So that's where I am. It is about eight hours by bus from Nairobi, west of the country.
So you are it's nighttime there. It's at 12:45 p.m. We're during our noon hour today here in Toronto. So what time is it there in Kenya?
It is 8:45 p.m.
And it's dark already.
Nice. Yes.
Okay.
I have to use a spotlight because I don't have electricity in my home. I use a torch, a spotlight, so that you can see my face.
Well, I'm delighted that we get you by Zoom. The technology is, I would imagine, quite a challenge, but it seems to be working at the moment. So good. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Well, we have somebody else who may join us in a bit. He's a little tied up at the moment, but we will have somebody from Kiev, Ukraine, I think, in a little while. So what I normally do is ask people what's on your mind. And I would like to focus it a little bit and each person can go around and say what you've been preoccupied with lately. But one of the things that I'm thinking is this is a brand new year. And, if we think large, think big about what we would like to accomplish this year and what are the real challenges facing us and what do we think of as our priorities for the year, that will give us certainly plenty of grounds for a conversation. So you may not be prepared to answer it that way, and you can talk about whatever you'd rather talk about. So I'm going to go just from left to right on my screen because you're all little thumbnails on my screen. And Liz, Elizabeth Renzetti, what's on your mind these days?
What is on my mind? Being stuck in the house because I have Omicron right now. I think I have the Omicron variant, although I don't really know because you can't really get tested in Ontario. So that's kind of on my mind. And it's a strange way to start the year because I've been so careful for the past 2 years. Not as careful as Meta, maybe, because I have left the house, but I feel fine anyway. I have to say I felt quite panicky on New Year's Day, not because I was sick, because I actually feel fine, but because the world just seems so dark. I was watching that movie, Don't Look Up, and thinking about the climate crisis, and I was thinking about the opioid crisis, the poison drug supply, which is just tearing through Canada and isn't getting much, recognition at all. And thinking about like what's happening south of the border, how that threatens us in Canada and in the rest of the world. So it feels a bit perilous, I have to say, right now. I'm very curious to see what the other panelists have to say, especially Davidson. I would be really interested to hear about the situation in Kenya right now and what you're going through.
Okay, I'm going to go to your next on my screen is A.B. Weisfeld in Montreal. What's on your mind, A.B.?
I had a rather sort of a sad thought the end of last year in terms of geopolitics, in terms of what one can expect as the agents of transformation in the world, actually recuperate what we can from what we have built up in our human civilization. So if the third world, is in the avant-garde of the liberation of us all, basically, how can they actually liberate us, from dependency of in the capitalist system of petrol, oil, on an international scale, without stopping the sale of the oil from its source, that is from the third world itself, when in fact they're trying in many cases to use that revenue in order to benefit the people who live there and who are living in poverty. So it's a dilemma, what to do there. So I was going to ask you for the solution. And perhaps Elizabeth.
I was just remarking to Netta just before this call that this new lockdown here in Ontario is certainly concerning, and the trends that we're seeing around the world with Omicron. And I heard a recent report that they expect 200,000 businesses in Ontario to close. That's going to have
Permanently.
Yes, massive impacts on the livelihoods of so many people already in crisis mode in the pandemic.
All right, Davidson, how's everything in Kenya and what's on your mind?
Yes, thank you so much, Meta. We have just begun the new year for us here in Africa. Christmas time and the new year is normally a big celebration. But now, unfortunately, this time round, because of COVID and the resultant restrictions and the economic turndown, where most businesses have closed down. Also, schools just resuming. Today was the first day of school. Because of COVID, our academic calendar has been reshuffled. So normally, under normal circumstances, January is normally the first month of the academic year. But incidentally, this is now the last month of the year. So the last semester of the year just beginning in January. We run from January to March. Under normal circumstances, the year ends in around September, November, December. But this time, the academic year is just ending now. So it is a overhaul of our academic calendar here in Kenya. And so I run an NGO, a non-profit that works in the communities. I work mostly with the migrant families, or we call them internally displaced. We have people where we've been displaced because of politically instigated violence, violent conflicts. We also have families that have been displaced due to flooding. Because of our part of the country, a lot of rivers flow from the Mount Elgon, and when they flow down, there's flooding because a lot of water is not controlled, and it causes devastation. Homes are destroyed, and the people displaced from their homes. So my nonprofit works to cushion and to find support for such families that have been displaced. The practical ways that we do to help such families, where we provide some shelter. We also provide educational support for children from such families who need to go to school. and we provide the school supplies, writing material, and what have you. So what is running through my mind at this first week of the year, it is how do I find support for such families who are now needing my services, and their numbers are growing each day. They come to my home, they come to my office, they knock, they say, help us. We need your help. We need your support. We are at crossroads. So that's what is running through my mind. How do I connect with well-wishers around the world who might not know about the problems people are facing in my community here in Africa, and who can be able to provide the appropriate support? So
How
that is
many
it.
people are you attempting to help now, Davidson?
Yeah. Currently, I have 100 families that I support. I have an additional 50 who I'm looking for support for, but I've not been able to attend to their needs. Right in my own home, my own little home, I have opened my doors to other children who are displaced. Some cannot be able to trace their parents. Their parents were lost during the violences. So my home has several people living who are dependent on me. I have to take them to school. I have to provide clothing. I have to give them food. I have to look for medical attention for them when they get fever. So that kind of strains my resource, my income, which is just meager.
Oh my God.
I have some experience in the funding of social programs like that in the third world. In Nablus, I do help to support the Tanweer Palestinian Cultural Enlightenment Forum. But it's an organizing center, cultural center, and a political center. In your case, where you have social function, you would be able to get funding more so from UNESCO and the agencies, which are designed to provide funding for your project. Otherwise, it would be not feasible to do so because it's so localized.
How could he contact the right people to get funding, if you know, Aby? Because maybe you can give him some help with this.
Well, at the UNESCO site,
Davidson, do you know about UNESCO, and what have you considered what he's proposing?
Yes, I know about UNESCO. They have an office in Nairobi, here in Kenya, but I do not know about their funding procedures. Yeah, I do not know. I'm not sure whether they fund non-profits like mine. I'm not very sure, but I know they have a presence in our country, and mostly they fund cultural, like sites of conscience or museums. Yeah, that's the bit information that I have about UNESCO.
Aby, do you know whether they fund NGOs?
Yes. Also, there is funding on and off, like a tap from the United States called USAID. They give money most easily. USAID, it's called. Yeah, but it's very difficult to get funding. Like here in Montreal, we have a cultural center that I have in a duplex of mine in the Plateau Montreal area. And we can't even get, funding, for the pandemic, let alone, like for cultural, pursuits. Although we did manage to get the street festival this summer that provided $4,100, as a subsidy for each of the musicians that came to play on the street, because it was to save the restaurants, who couldn't have, customers inside. So we closed down the street, and they set up terraces everywhere. It worked. All sorts of things like that you can do, festivals, to get funding as well, from people who want to come out and dance.
I know structured organizations like USAID or UNESCO have systems, and it's not easy for them to. It's not easy for small entities like us to access their funding. The procedure, the routine
Yes.
The paperwork that goes in and the time,
Yes.
you see, it's really tedious.
Then you have to
Uh,
you have to network with other projects like that and make a common proposal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But on the maybe to begin with, I will propose that if some of you folks on the call here could buy into in, and maybe if you can help with the raising funds even from your neighborhoods and from your contacts, small donations that can help with the school supplies or shoes for the children on our support program. We have children who do not have shoes, and as such, they are beaten by ticks, and the ticks turn into jiggers, and their legs swell, so to the point they're not even able to walk or go to school. So there are such small support that can come from your neighborhoods, from your contacts, will really be appreciated. That is just food for thought.
If possible, you provide us with a link in the chat where a donation can be made. And then also we can share that link with our other networks.
Well, I'll tell you what I will do. This show always gets publicized to some extent. Adam sends out posters every week for about 6,000, well, maybe a little less, email addresses. And then we post it on Facebook and our website. And the people who watch it, we can tell them that if they'd like to be in touch, here's how to get in touch with you. So send me your email address and I'll post it I'll put it right on this video. And the people watching it will be able to see it and get in touch with you if they have an idea how to help you, or if they can contribute some money. Okay.
I'll do that right away.
Okay, very good. Okay, so Liz, bring us up to date about what does it feel like to have COVID? I have never had this enriching experience.
I can't complain because I'm not only double vaccinated, but haven't had a booster. So yeah, so I feel like I can't complain because I know about the vaccine inequity around the world, and I feel terrible that so many parts of the world have not had 1 or 2 shots, let alone 3. So I feel slightly guilty. I think I would feel much worse if I obviously did not have these shots. Again, you can't really get tested in Ontario right now. We were fortunate enough before Christmas, we had mailed away for some tests that cost like $80. We used those as a way to be able to go have Christmas dinner with one other household, because the government had, the regulations were that you could have 10 people together. So we had 8 people together for Christmas. We tested, everyone was negative. So it must have happened after that. And then we didn't have any more tests. We only had 1 test. Doug took it. We were all feeling just a bit sniffly and just a bit of like sore throat. And he took the test and it turned out to be positive. So that means that we probably all have it. So the children in our house who are 16 and 20 don't have any symptoms. I have symptoms, but they're very mild. Doug has symptoms, they're very mild. Like I say, we haven't been going out. I've canceled all international. I haven't left the province since August 2020. So, I don't know what to say. You can be as careful, maybe not as careful as Meta, but quite careful, and still it will slip through. I'm curious to know what it's like in Kenya.
We have vaccines that are now available. In fact, we have three variations of vaccines now. We have the Pfizer. We normally give at least 2 shots in a difference of a month. And then the Johnson's and Johnson's, which is just give 1 vial and it suffices. So we have about 4 million Kenyans have received the jab now. And the government 2 days ago announced those who had received the first jab can go for a booster jab now. Towards the end of the last year, the government had announced measures to they were making the vaccination mandatory, and they were requiring that only those who receive who are vaccinated can access government sites or government offices or even a public transport. But later on, the courts ruled that as unconstitutional. So the courts ruled, they said vaccination should be voluntary, should not be mandatory. Yeah. So
are most people willing and eager to take the vaccinations, or are they, do you have what they politely nowadays call hesitancy? Are there many people who are reluctant or fearful about the whole thing?
No, the majority of the population have now understood the importance and the necessity of being vaccinated. So a lot of people are going for voluntary vaccination. They're visiting local hospitals and the medical centers to be vaccinated. So it is not, they're not being compelled, but they are doing voluntarily.
Well, yeah, of course they would be doing it voluntarily, but do you have people who say, even if it's available, I don't want it, I won't take it? There are people like that here, and unfortunately, I think quite a few people. In fact, I expect that probably we would be in a very different situation in terms of the stage of the pandemic if people had taken the vaccine when they should have, when it was available, because some people refused, and that just means that it was that much easier for it to keep on spreading. But I don't know, I haven't heard anybody say whether you find a lot of people in Africa and other countries saying they don't want it no matter what.
Yeah, we have a small percentage who are a little bit skeptical, who are not willing to go for the vaccination. And this is also informed by the fact that a few cases have been reported where a few people went and they were vaccinated and there were complications. Like in my village here, just last week, we had an incident of someone who developed complications. After being vaccinated, he fell unwell and he passed on. He died. So such cases make people to be a bit skeptical and afraid. A few, but a very small percentage of our population is unwilling to go for vaccination. Majority are going and are being vaccinated.
Well, I would think the majority would be thinking, the quicker the better, the more access, the better. But, I find it bizarre that anybody would think otherwise. Anyway.
There's a fundamental question here that unfortunately it's limited by the existing healthcare system, which is entirely inadequate.
Yes.
And if, we were scientific about it, the solution is to use the antibodies that are being produced by the convalescent patients, such as myself. I had COVID, didn't even know it, until I had a blood test, and I have the antibodies, from both the vaccine and from the virus. And the antibodies, from the vaccine are not an antiviral agent. They're just an anti-speckle agent. They just, block the crust of the virus and nothing else. So it's still very limited, what the reaction is to this pandemic, inevitable pandemic. So, the most valuable commodity, in the world, today is the convalescent plasma from the patients in South Africa and Botswana in mass, who can provide, the convalescent plasma by centrifuge, blood donations, paid blood donations, in exchange, for vaccines, because the poverty of vaccination of the third world is one of the reasons why we have, this looping effect, of a new variety that's been produced by a nest of infections, which is inevitable again. So really, the whole system is breaking down.
So how complicated and expensive is it to produce these antibody, what do you call them?
Convalescent plasma antibody treatments, yes, by transfusion directly for very sick patients, but it can be cloned. The antibodies can be cloned, from the latest variety produced in mass. Like they have some few distribution of such, monoclonal antibody treatment pills, but they cost, like $1,000 a piece or something like that because it's not being mass produced. So in China, of course, all this is being done. They even have a machine, to harvest plasma from a patient, who's connected on both ends of the machine. And then that's, the transfer is, immediately available, to anybody else. So, China has had 10,000 infections and 2 deaths or something like that, according to healthcare statistics. They're not governmental statistics.
You mean from the Omicron?
It's a totally different, like scene, there. And this shows you the total difference in orientation that 2 systems have in respect to, society as a social organism, as a, concerned with social biology and, the mass as a
Now,
body.
hold on. I'm not going to let you get through with that because I don't believe that. I mean, are you taking that as a gospel truth, or do you think? Where did you get those numbers? 10,000 and 2 deaths. Well, for one thing, the guy who discovered the disease died of it. So we know there's one of those deaths. And I certainly don't trust their figures. If they're reporting that they had 2 deaths, I bet there are 200,000 or more at least.
Okay. However exaggerated it is, nonetheless, it's a totally different scene there, when there's just a little cluster, in one city, they shut down the whole city, they don't shut down the whole country after it's too late. They do it immediately and they take care of the problem. And then they have, so many treatments. They have 30 drugs that they use in the healthcare system for treating patients who are in hospital care. And then they use convalescent plasma as well, on the mass scale. It's not unknown. It's approved by the FDA. It's used at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York and in California hospitals, for the staff there. They get convalescent plasma treatment.
Well, could it be, I mean, you say it's manufactured in China readily. I mean, if that's the case, then certainly they should be making it everywhere. But
it is.
How difficult, and if it's $1,000 a pill, it must not be a real easy thing to produce.
No. But it can be done on a mass scale. On the mass scale, it's anything can be done on the mass scale.
I don't know. Anybody
But,
else?
the pharmaceutical companies, are not interested in the mass scale because there's no patent on it. Therefore, there's no royalties.
I don't believe that this is the time where these companies are that avaricious. I mean,
okay, maybe they can twist it, to make it sort of original, and get a patent for it. But they're not even doing that.
There was just a story from the States the last week about the School of Tropical Medicine developing I think it was a pediatric vaccine, wasn't it? And giving the patent away, which is what should be happening. Mm-hmm. I'm astonished it's not. I really am true. At the beginning of the pandemic, I wrote some of these stories about how, this is going to be the moment when we have a paradigm shift about our exploitative economic system. And yet nothing really seems to have changed very much. Except maybe there's a bit more power in the labor movement. But this thing around vaccines is just like crazy that, the patents not being shared. I find it really astonishing.
And if all of that money was available for staff, or for the education of the staff, then we'd have the facilities to be able to treat people so they get immunized rather than vaccinated. Immunization is much more powerful as well and lasts. And produces T cells that are lasting, immunization. But vaccination is not as efficient, as immunization.
Can you explain the difference? Sorry that I don't know.
Immunization is the antibodies, for the virus. But vaccination is merely an inhibitor of the virus by preventing it from transmitting itself into a human cell.
Okay.
I think we really need to have an expert on this. I am very loath to put on a talk show where everybody is just speculating. And I know so little about this that I really do not want to misinform viewers. I just wish that if we were going to talk about COVID, I wish we'd got somebody who was really knowledgeable about it to join us. I actually want to pass this by somebody who's knowledgeable for additional comment, because honestly, AB, I know nothing about this, and I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to call my friend Ronald St. John. Ronald St. John is one of the great epidemiologists in the world at the Pan American Health Organization, which is the regional office of the World Health Organization. He was the director for infectious disease control for the Americas. His career at the Public Health Agency of Canada he was the first Director General of the Center for Emergency Preparedness and Response. He was in charge of the SARS epidemic when it happened in Canada.
Show him the video, yes.
I'm going to get him to comment, and I'm going to put his little Zoom commentary at the end of this show. So everybody talking about this should go to the end of the show, and there'll be probably a little commentary by Dr. St. John. Okay, good. Thank you for this. I don't mean to insult anybody. I really don't, because I
necessary precaution, I know, because there's lots of misinformation.
Yeah, right. Liz, you mentioned something, this drug epidemic, which you say is still going. Now, if they charged the companies that made these drugs or these opioid medications and have stopped the production and the dissemination or distribution of these pills, why is this still going on? And is it really as bad as it was before? And is it that we don't pay attention to it because we're so busy with other issues, or what's happening about that topic? I don't understand it.
Well, I'm not an expert in this, but in my understanding and my reading and some of the reporting I've done, I think we have to separate it. We're not talking about a crisis of prescription drugs, really. That's a whole other thing. And yes, we can talk about the overprescription of prescription drugs. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. What this is, what we're seeing in Canada and in the States, is what the medical officers of Toronto and other cities are calling a poisoned drug crisis. What that means is these are street drugs that are being cut with other drugs that are toxic, that are tainted, that are leading to overdoses. So, for example, you had something like at least 30 people, unhoused people in Toronto, die recently. And many of them were people who were victims of the tainted drug supply. So there's a bunch of things going on. For example, to address this, the federal government is looking at, having pilot projects of essentially, decriminalized drug supplies for individual use in certain places, like in Vancouver, possibly. There's a pilot project in Toronto. So what you would have is people being supplied with or having access to drugs that are not poison, that are not toxic, that are not tainted, and have a safe place to consume those drugs. So it seems to be that's the way we're going towards decriminalization, possibly even at some point in the future, a legalized and regulated and safe a supply of substances for people who choose to consume substances. I don't think that's like in the immediate future, but there are definitely countries that have done this. Portugal's the one that's kind of brought up the most.
Well, I know that there used to be a clinic down, I think, on Queen Street or someplace for people who were narcotics users. And they could go there and get their injections in a place that there was a nurse available in case something happened. And it was available for them. I think they even supplied it. I'm not sure. I don't know whatever happened to that. Is that still in existence? Do you know?
Yeah, they've actually expanded the number of safe injection, or now they call them safe consumption sites, because it's not just injection. Around the province, there's obviously been like political blowback and maybe some local blowback too. But the problem now is you often see like the crises. It seems to me there's this like overlapping series of crises around, people being unhoused for one thing, people losing their livelihoods, people being evicted, let's say. They turn to maybe like a drug that is, let's say somebody's offering them and they don't know what's there, and they're in a shelter hotel and it's not being properly supervised. And so you end up with this kind of like overlapping crises. And, doctors are talking about it. People who work on the streets are talking about it. You have like the Association of the Chiefs of Police of Canada talking about how, perhaps decriminalization is the way we need to go because the war on drugs has just not worked and has led to this toxic supply.
Mhm. Okay. Now we have a newcomer, Andrei Kamenshikov, who's in Ukraine. Hello, Andrei.
Yeah, except right now I'm not in Ukraine. I'm in a kind of log cabin in about
Where?
100 miles south of Moscow. My sister lives in this rural area, and I'm visiting here. So
Oh, okay. I see logs behind you. So you're literally in a log cabin, and no
yeah,
kidding.
literally, yeah. They have
Uh-huh.
this big house that they built out of logs, and in the
I'll
middle
be
of
darned.
basically in the middle of a field in
I'll be
a
darned.
rural area.
Okay, what brings you to that part of Russia?
Well, as I said, I'm visiting. This is
Just
where my sister lives, so
uh-huh.
with her family.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad. Tell me what's on your mind. We've each been sharing what our concerns are. And let me introduce you. Liz Renzetti is here, A.B. Weisfeld in Montreal, Adam here in Toronto, and Davidson Anhoya is in Kenya. So what's on everybody's mind nowadays there?
Generally speaking, politically, of course, it's a very sad picture because the end of last year was marked by a number of decisions that have been really, cracking down on any civil society, including probably the most famous civil society organization, Memorial, which was
Mhm.
focused mainly on memory of people that were victims of political repressions. And so when
But weren't they
organizations like
also
that,
pretty active in trying to support current
yes, that's true.
actions of the state?
That's true, and maybe that's what had what actually led to this reaction of the government. But basically, what the government wants to do, it wants to install a system of management similar to Soviet times, but without the communist ideology and without, limitations on wealth and consumption and things like that. So, they want to be in charge indefinitely and rip the wealth of the country in their favor, and any criticism, any dissent is seen as a threat to them. And of course, then the other thing is that, there's still talk about a possible military conflict with Ukraine, which will be a major disaster.
Well, to what extent do people believe that that's really going to happen, or real possibility? How many people think it's just blackmail? What do you think?
I think it's blackmail, but the problem is when blackmail doesn't work, the people that are doing this, how far are they ready to go? And that's what nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even they don't know.
Mm-hmm. So if they say they're going to do something and then their bluff gets called, do they feel they have to carry through something? Yeah.
That's what everybody doesn't know. That's the problem. Nobody, I think it's pretty clear that they do not have a chance of militarily, defeating Ukraine completely, but maybe they think that they can inflict some serious defeat on the Ukrainian military, take some key parts of the country, and then dictate the conditions of a new truce. that's what might be there. What I expect their calculations might be,
Mhm.
and that's a very I think it's wrong. I think that even if they are successful or semi-successful in some ways, they're what I see that might happen is even if that happens, and even if they do achieve some military victories, which is questionable, what the big miscalculation is that I don't think that the Ukrainian government or the Ukrainian people will be ready to accept a truce under, these new conditions. And basically, uh, it might be a protracted military conflict. There, the Russian government will not have reserves to continue, advancing and to hold on to its gains.
What
And
makes
then
you
it might
think
be,
that I'm sorry, I should let Amy ask his question, but I'm just wondering what makes you think that the Ukrainian people wouldn't you're saying like they wouldn't accept a ceasefire or something like that?
uh, that's my feeling. I might be wrong, but that's my feeling. And I think that with the support of most other countries, with the a direct threat for the independence and the sovereignty of Ukraine, I do not think, and in under the conditions of an open military intervention of a foreign country, I do not believe that neither the Ukrainian establishment nor the majority of the Ukrainian people will be ready to accept, a peaceful settlement that will be imposed on them in these kind of circumstances. And I think that Russia doesn't have the capacity to uh, to do more than I it's very questionable whether they are able to achieve, let's say, enough to bring peace under their conditions, under their terms. So this is a dead end, basically.
With respect to the last remarks, I think that there could be some reluctance on the part of Ukraine to sign any sort of agreement because of the differences over the Crimea, which is still claimed by the Ukraine, even though it was formerly part of Russia and belonged to the Tatars, actually, who were deported. So, but the logistical logic that I have heard behind this, Russian buildup, is that there is a plan for NATO forces to be stationed in the Ukraine, and this Russia will not allow. And if they are placed, then Russia will attack those forces, but not the Ukrainian forces.
No. There are no NATO forces in Ukraine.
Unless,
This is
no,
this is
but
a fake,
it
and
is.
it's a fake. It's a propaganda tool that Russia uses to justify its actions. Because they're not admitting that they're ready to fight Ukraine. They're trying to basically what they're saying. We are protecting against NATO. NATO's our enemy, and the Ukraine leaders are just puppets of the U.S. and NATO, and so.
So you're saying there's no plans for NATO installations in Ukraine?
I don't think there are. I don't see any reason
Troops or
why.
missiles, or missiles either, because that's
Yeah,
what's provoked this
course not.
even more so.
Well,
Because now missiles are being placed in Eastern Europe against Russia.
well, as I understand, the only missiles that are placed in a couple of places in Eastern Europe are based on are part of missile defense systems, or air defense systems. And from what I know, NATO has not been expanding its military infrastructure into the East much over the last decades. In fact, it was cutting down quite significantly its installations in Eastern Europe. I think it was a terrible mistake, primarily, of course, of the Trump administration to move out of the treaty on middle-range missiles, and I hope that maybe something that could be discussed is to try to with Russia to try to resume that treaty or a similar treaty that simply will not allow the placement of offensive weapons like missiles and things like that in Eastern Europe or in Ukraine, as well as in European areas of Russia. I think that can be
Should be.
agreement. Yeah. But I don't believe that's I think in the Russian calculations, this is not their true concern. I think that they have a different agenda, and they're just using this as a smokescreen to try to justify their actions.
Okay, Avi, tell us what's going on in Palestine, if you will.
Abbas has met with Bennett, which is cataclysmic in terms of Israeli politics. Bennett is supposedly on the right wing, Orthodox, kippah wearing, and he's met with Abbas. And then Abbas, of course, gets viciously criticized for doing so, and justifiably so as well. So it's like a lot of turmoil happening. And then there's an announcement that the next Prime Minister of Israel, Lapid, from the Secularist Party, has already announced that he's going to refuse to negotiate with the Palestinian Authority, that Israel will refuse to enter into negotiations with Palestine. In other words, they refuse to recognize Palestine, even though Palestine has recognized Israel, and Israel expects everybody else to do so as well, without recognizing Palestine. So that's the key issue right now. The diplomatic strategy is going to be focusing on the recognition of Palestine by Israel, and if not by Israel, then by everybody else, until Israel has to as well. Otherwise, there's fights all over the place.
What did these two guys say at the end of their conversation, Abbas and Bennett?
Nothing.
They talked, but they didn't tell you what they said?
Yeah, obviously they disagreed, and so they had nothing to report, that was good, so they didn't report anything at all.
So you think he shouldn't have gone, Abbas shouldn't have agreed to even talk to the other guy?
Depends what they talked about. If Abbas talked about, he made an announcement, a while back, saying that if Israel doesn't recognize Palestine in the coming year, then Palestine will withdraw its recognition of Israel. Now, what does that mean? It means withdrawal from the security cooperation, because there's a special Palestinian police force funded by Israel, basically armed by Israel, that arrest Palestinians who are planning to attack Israel, basically. So he's threatening to withdraw from that security cooperation. It's called the Preventive Security Police. They have brown Jeeps, new stuff, all over the place. And they arrest Palestinians. They have a Palestinian prison even. They once arrested the head of the left-wing movement there, the PFLP. And then the prison was invaded by Israel, and he was taken away as their prisoner and kept in isolation since then.
Mm-hmm. Davidson, are you back with us? Hello.
Of course.
You had mentioned that you worked with displaced persons internally within Kenya. Do you also work with displaced persons outside of Kenya that have migrated into the country?
Yes.
And if so, from where?
I work with other countries.
So the displaced persons that you worked with, are they only from Kenya migrating within Kenya, or are they also from outside Kenya?
Okay. I get your question now. A majority of my clients, the beneficiaries of my project, are internally displaced persons who have been displaced from other parts of this country. Though we have a few South Sudanese who are also living here in Kenya, people from Southern Sudan, and a few of them are incorporated into my program. But the chunk of my project benefits those who are internally displaced.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I would be curious, to ask what happens to the people you're helping once they've, they've achieved some security? Do they tend to settle around there if they've been displaced? Where do they migrate to?
What's the explanation for these floods that you say are causing people to have to migrate?
Yeah, the Mount Elgon where I am is the Mount Elgon where I am is one of the water towers, the source of the fresh water. We experience a lot of rainfall here, being a mountainous area, and the top of the mountain is also forest.
So I'm going to cut us off now, even though I don't know what this whole conversation is kind of disjointed.
It's been like the year itself, Meta.
Yes, well, anyway, it's been a great pleasure to be with you. And even if we can't be too coherent with our conversation, it's really worth our attention to be in touch. So I'm glad to see all of you, and I'm really glad that you're able to stagger to the microphone and let me in on your world a little bit. So thank you very much, and I'll say goodbye.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys, friends.
Bye.
So here we have Dr. Ronald St. John, who's in Ottawa, in his home or near Ottawa. And I've asked him to watch the little portion of the video where we're into the weeds, where we're talking about things that nobody's absolutely sure of. And I'd like your thoughts, Ronald, if you'll comment on the conversation that we had, and whether or not there's anything that maybe could stand to be corrected.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there are a couple of things I'd like to try to clarify about the use of antibodies for the treatment of infectious diseases. Number one, there's been a long history of use of serum from patients who've recovered from infectious diseases. Way before we had antibiotics, we used to use serum to treat people who had infectious diseases. More recently, we've gotten more sophisticated. In general, when you're infected with an agent, your body makes a collage of antibodies. Some are directed against one part of the agent, some against the other. In the case of coronavirus, some antibodies are directed against the spike protein, some are directed against the capsule, some are directed against pieces of the virus. And so this is what's called polyclonal. In other words, a collage of antibodies. Now, we have the technology to create a single antibody, like, for example, the antibody that attacks the spike of the virus. That would be called a monoclonal antibody. It gets rid of the collage, and you just have an antibody that attacks the spike, for example. And that was intended to stop the spike from attaching to the cell so the virus can get into the cell. So, okay, we can make monoclonal antibodies. And there are actually 3 monoclonal antibodies that have been authorized for emergency use in the United States by the Food and Drug Administration and also by Canada's regulatory bodies. So these antibodies are available, but there's a lot of caveats. Number one, 2 of these antibodies don't work well against Omicron. So there's a limitation there. Number 2, the antibodies have got to be used in a special way. Number 1, it's shown that they don't work once you're already hospitalized with COVID. They don't make any difference. So when do the antibodies make a difference? Well, if you are within 10 days of getting your symptoms and you have a positive test, and you have and you're older than 60, and you have what we call pre-existing conditions that make you highly susceptible to serious illness, then the antibody administration will reduce the number of hospitalizations, and it'll reduce the number of emergency room visits that you'll have to make. But this is before you get in the hospital. And the trouble there is the treatment has to be given intravenously. So it's not just like taking a pill or swallowing some liquid. It has to be injected into your veins. So this is not a simple solution. It is a tool. It can be helpful in reducing the amount of illness among the elderly, but it is a limited tool. The antibodies that we produce as a result of the natural infection are not that strong in this particular particular virus. They do wane after a period of time. So again, producing a lot of monoclonal antibodies is not going to be, quote, a solution. It is a tool we can use for very special circumstances, but is not going to be a mass use kind of a tool, at least at the present time.
And none of them will work after you're already showing symptoms.
No, it's if you have symptoms, or you're within 10 days of your having had symptoms, that's when they will work best. But if you're not in the hospital, if you're already in the hospital, they're not going to make much difference in what happens, because your disease is advanced. So the idea is you have to catch the disease very early. And even then, they're going to be limited. They do tend to reduce the number of hospitalizations that will happen and the number of visits you'll make to the emergency room by some. It doesn't eliminate them altogether. So it's a very limited tool that it is a tool that the clinician needs for very special cases, and the ones that can have the antibody administered intravenously, et cetera.
So this can't really easily be done on a mass scale.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's not a good tool. I'd just like to make one other comment, and there was some comment about some difference between vaccination and immunization. But I'd like to be clear that the purpose of a vaccine is to induce immunity. So the vaccine is administered, the result is hopefully immunity. So it's really linked. There's no difference really between vaccination and immunization. The objective of vaccination is to create immunity, and immunity is the result of vaccination. So just wanted to clarify that.
Now, the other thing I think that puzzled me a little bit was the whether or not the Chinese have really been that effective in suppressing the spread of the pandemic. And whether to believe their published numbers or reported numbers.
Well, based on their reporting, it would appear that they have been relatively successful in a fairly high level of control of the virus, but at draconian cost. When they detect a few cases of the disease in a particular city, they have no reservations about closing an entire city of 13 million people overnight. And they've done that recently in two cities of at least 10 to 13 million people. This is something we just can't do in our country and in our culture. Once you close down a city, you stop people's contacts with each other, and you can really bring about a halt to the spread of the disease. But there's a huge economic cost and the cost to people's welfare when you shut down 13 million people overnight.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I feel sure now that we've got real facts out there, and it's very good of you to do that. So thank you so much, and I'll talk to you again soon.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
This is episode number 394, our challenges in 2022. If you want to navigate to watch some of these other shows, you simply go to our website, to savetheworld.ca, and in the search bar at the top, you enter the episode number of the show that you want to watch, or the title of the show, or the name of one of the speakers, and it'll take you right there where you can watch the video or listen to it as an audio podcast. And then please scroll down and give us your own thoughts about the subject that we discussed. See you there.